get started then. So I guess I'll call the meeting to order, and then our board secretary has a statement to read.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And once again, I just wanted to let everyone know that Verizon is experiencing service issues. So there may be some lag times or disconnections during the meetings today. We ask for your patience as we work with Verizon to get through that. Good morning, board, staff, and members of the public. After my statement, the chairman will open this meeting and explain the rules for this electronic meeting. Please keep your microphone on mute when you are not speaking. The technical support team may proactively mute participants if the microphone is picking up background noise. Board members should check to make sure your microphone is not muted before speaking. You may text me 540-336-3948 at any time during the meeting if you need technical support, and an IT tech will call your cell to assist. I now turn the meeting over to Committee Chairman Bonfils.
Thank you. I too also have a chairman's statement to read. In accordance with the governor's state of emergency declaration and executive orders regarding COVID-19 pandemic, the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors Continuity Order and General Assembly 2020 Budget Amendments 28 and 137, Loudoun Water will meet today in an electronic meeting in compliance with these special procedures. Only action items necessary to continue the operations of Loudoun Water and discharge its lawful purposes, duties, responsibilities will be discussed during today's meeting. Reports and other meeting information are available on board docs. Public notice for the meeting access information was provided on Loudoun Water website. Recording of the meeting will be available on board docs at the following link. I won't read the link to you, but it's available. We'll put it in the notes. The board members wishing to speak are reminded to press unmute and identify themselves by name so that staff can accurately capture their comments. All items will be recommended to the November 12th board meeting, the full board for Loudoun Water. The board secretary now will take roll call and attendance of the committee members.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bonfils?
Here.
Mr. Allen?
Here.
Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Mr. Sultan?
Here.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. And the next item on the agenda is to approve the agenda, and it's on the screen and was provided.
So moved.
Could I have a motion to
Second.
Have a second? Any discussion?
Roll call vote.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. Bonfils?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Sultan?
Yes.
Unanimous. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right. So just one comment on my part. The tour of the site was really very good that we did last week. I went out in the afternoon afterwards with my lab and captured some beautiful sunset. I'll try and share some of those pictures before the next board meeting. It really turned out foggy in the morning and really nice sunset and beautiful scenes, fall scenes in the evening. So thanks everybody for attending that on-site walk. So let's go with the special project and start the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Bonfils. So I just want to provide a few notes before I turn it over to Stefan. First of all, I want to express our appreciation to the committee for meeting so frequently, every 2 weeks. We do feel confident that if we get through today's meeting with some direction and then our November 16th meeting, that we can then resume a more normal schedule, if you will, for the Water Resources Committee, whereby the agenda wouldn't be dedicated solely to the park. So again, we appreciate your participation and patience as we get everything back on track. There was also some discussion at the last meeting, and I like to just follow up and make sure that things are clarified if there was any confusion. So Stefan and I were both discussing with you the agreement with Nova Parks, the $10 million amount. And so I just wanted to clarify that from an agreement perspective, the 10 million is an all-inclusive cost for design and construction. And then that 10 million, or that's an estimate, of course, served as the basis to determine what Nova Parks' share would be of the design and construction. In accordance with the agreement, that's 20% of the design and construction, not to exceed 2 million. So in addition to the 2 million, or whatever that amount would, up to 2 million, Nova Parks has already paid Loud and Water $500,000 after execution of the agreement. So the maximum contribution from Nova Parks is 2.5 million. Just to clarify that in the way that we presented it last month. And the remainder would be Loud and Water. So based on our discussion at the last meeting, staff is moving forward with the design process and getting the project back on track. And so we want to make sure that we tell you that we continue to look for cost savings that don't impact the scope, hopefully too much, or the intent of the park. So that being said, what Stefan will be presenting to you today as critical path items are choices, keeping in mind that staff's recommendation on those choices would be the most cost-effective solutions. And before I turn it over to Stefan, I think it's worth noting when we talk about taking time and effort to do things, Stefan is with us today, not just remotely from his home, he's remote from, I'm not really sure where, but he is on vacation this week, and he graciously is taking time out today to make his presentation. So I just want to personally thank him for that. And with that, I will turn it over to him to start walking through the presentation. Oh, I do want to acknowledge as well that we have Paul Gilbert and Nova Parks on the call. We also have Evan Grimm with Nelsonburg Waltz and his team on the call. And of course, our consultant and dear friend, Dale, is also on the call. So a lot of expertise, and hopefully, and Mr. Steve Torpy, I'm sorry, who will talk to us about trails. We have a lot of expertise on the call, and hopefully can get your questions addressed. And with that, Stefan, it's all yours.
Mr. Koblis has a question.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Koblis?
Hey, Carla, real quick. So just to clarify, the 2.5 million is part of the 10 million, not an additional to the 10 million.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Hope you guys can all hear me well. So for today's presentation, we have a couple items to go through. I figure I'd give a quick recap of the schedule, and I'll go over some items to help manage costs of the park. And I think the bulk of this discussion is going to be the final two bullets. We have some critical path design decisions to make, the bridge versus pier, and then some architectural discussions. And then finally, we have some trail overviews. I'll give a quick overview of the trails in the park, and then we also have Steve Torpy to give an overview of the county trails from a larger scale. So starting off with just the schedule, this is something you guys saw at the last meeting. As you can see, we're in our second water resources meeting, and the decisions that are made today feed into the 50% construction documents. Right now, the goal is to have a submission by Nelsonburg Waltz and their team by the end of the year. So that's 8 or 9 weeks or so away. So time's sticking with that, and we also have Thanksgiving and Christmas. So decisions made today are going to be vital in meeting that deadline. And then from there, hopefully get cost estimates and further refine the design, and hopefully bid it out sometime next summer. So with that, I'll just go ahead and jump right in. we discussed this a bit last meeting, but just wanted to reiterate, we're looking for every opportunity to manage costs. One example of that is the reconfiguration of the boat rental. The team really likes this. It simplifies the design without altering any of the intent. Doesn't take away from anything of the park, so we're happy with that reconfiguration and simplification. One of the things we're going to be talking about today is a bridge versus pier, so I won't really hit on that much. And then lastly, we do have some flexibility to include bid alternates. This allows us to evaluate the bid costs or the bid prices when they come in and make some decisions after that based on costs and budget. We have some potential options we're thinking about, not sure yet. We'll discuss those more with the design team and bring those probably at a later meeting. Just to note that these are to be a bid alternate, it has to be something that's pretty simple to either add in or take out. Can't really involve doing two designs. We just don't have the budget in our design for that. So we'll bring you more of that in the upcoming months, but that's just a couple options we're looking at to help manage costs. But on today's agenda is the bridge versus pier discussion. So this is one of the critical path design decisions that we need to provide feedback to Nelsonburg Volts on. It's located on the southern end of the park. It's on the main arc. I have a map on the next slide to point out where it is. And as I mentioned, it's required to move forward with the design. This is something that's not viable as a bid alternate due to some design requirements. Again, we have to make two different designs essentially and have the contractors bid on two different options. And lastly, just a high level, rough order of magnitude cost is about $85,000 difference in the two options. So the bridge being more expensive than a pier, and give everyone a clear idea of where this is at. It's at the bottom right of your screen, obviously showing the big red circle. So it's the southern end of that main arc we'll talk about later today. Right now, this version is showing pier. We got next slide. I do have the bridge. It's a, I think 200 some foot bridge that will connect two ends of a little finger of Beaver Dam Reservoir. You can sort of see on the map down here, there is a trail that runs along on the edge where it will connect. And then we also have a trail system on the top that runs around. If we don't build this bridge, we're still able to access that far side of the finger, so to say. It's about 1,500 to 2,000 feet, I think it is, just from some preliminary measurements. So it's not inaccessible without the bridge, but again, it would make for a lot easier walking if there is a bridge. And then we also have on the left is a plan view of what the pier would look like. This isn't the exact image of the pier just because we haven't really fully designed it yet, but something where it's jut out into the water, still give you some views of down the reservoir, not to the extent that the bridge would, but allow people to go out in the water, experience a look down the reservoir. And to give a quick overview of what those view differences look like, just high level, just to give the board some perspective. So this is a shot looking north down the reservoir, all the way in the back here. You can see the dam. So one option would be having a pier, which juts out, 800 or so feet, maybe, probably not that far. And you'll get some views down the reservoir, which will be nice, but not to the extent that the bridge would provide. So you're sort of looking at that western edge of the reservoir. Whereas with a bridge, you'll have the option to view pretty much down the full length of the reservoir, which is about 1.5 miles. So it'd make for some great views throughout the length of the bridge. But again, it comes at a cost. We're looking, $80,000, $90,000 or so to extend all the way to that far tip. So I think the goal today is to get some feedback from the committee on sort of what route you'd like us to pursue. And if you have any questions or items to discuss, I think now would be a good time to talk about them.
And if I could just add, Stefan, to what you just said, I think we feel confident that bridge versus pier, the pier really doesn't take away from the educational aspect of what we want to do there. It really is about the views. So with that, I'll open it up to your questions. And I see there is a question. I'm not sure who that is.
Mr. Sultan?
Thank you.
Yes, Stefan, you mentioned how far you have to travel to get to that part of the park without the bridge. You mentioned, I missed the figure that you gave.
I think it's like 1,500 to 2,000 feet, depending on exactly where the trail loops. So yeah, I mean, not too far of a distance to walk. There's some decently beaten trails throughout that area, but I guess it's definitely not going to be obviously ADA accessible. And there are some rougher patches of the trail that people might have issues accessing the far side. But
Yeah, across the big.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Campbell and Mr. Allen?
Yes, for my part, the accessibility of the parks really important from my perspective, and we've heard from different folks in the community. Matter of fact, Cindy Quick is on I forget what it's called, the Disability Services Board or something like this, but I've heard them speak numerous times about the importance of having county facilities that are accessible to people with varying degrees of mobility and disability. And so from my perspective, I'd like to keep the bridge, and I'd like to see, frankly, us spend more money on more trails, more paths here at the park, not less. So that's where I'm coming from.
Mr. Allen has a question.
Yes, thank you. More of a comment. After having gone out there and walked last week with the committee, I was struck by the fact that the distance was not that great. For some reason, I had in my mind that the park was larger, and we actually covered walking to the bridge in a very short period of time. I was quite surprised how short the distance was. So what I'm leaning towards is supporting the bridge, because I think that opens up the walking aspect of the park and induces people to cross over the bridge and maybe walk on the other side. So as opposed to cutting them off. And I know when we walk down to the end of that cove, there are a lot of boulders, and I think that would be a tough place for people to cross, whereas the bridge is going to bring them over there on the other side relatively easier. So I'm for supporting the bridge, not only for the aesthetic view that you're going to get, but also for the walkability that both Brett and I would like to incorporate as much as we can in the park.
Thank you. Mr. Bonfils, I believe, had his hand up as well.
Yeah, I did. I guess I could lower it. I have to agree with the previous two board members. Having the bridge has a lot of value. It will be part of the trail system that is accessible, and having a sister who is wheelchair bound. It's I think it would be important to be able to get there as well as to get to the other pier. So that's my 2 cents, and I see there are a few other people that would like to talk. So
Yes,
I
Mr.
believe,
Koblis, right?
yes, thank you.
I'm fully support for this bridge. I mean, I think it's very important to get over to the other side and not walk 2,000 feet around rocks. However, I think we're bringing the cart before the horse, aren't we? I mean, how can we, try to evaluate an extra when we don't really know what the total cost is and what we're looking at? I mean, it just seems like we're trying to piecemeal this first when we should start with what our costs are, what our evaluation of the cost right now is, and then say, okay, well, these are some ideas that if we really feel like we're not going to get the board to approve extras, then these are our items that we think we should reduce in scope?
I think, and I would actually ask Dale to help me out with this one. I think this is part of where we keep hitting this wall, if you will, which is I think from staff's perspective, we felt like that's what we were covering at the last meeting, showing where the costs were. And when we talk about future reductions, those again are going to be either controversial or they're going to change the intent of the park. I think at the end of the day, it looks like if we want what we want for this park, at least at this point in time, it exceeds what that estimate was, and I think that's where we need the direction. I don't think that we can get there now.
Maybe we just need to review them because I don't have those costs in front of me right now. So maybe we just, if Stefan can remind us where we are, et cetera, then we can maybe evaluate this a little differently.
Yeah. Stefan, do you have that with you?
I do, and just to chime in on this, I mean, I think that's sort of the process we let play out in making this decision. So at the last design submission, we had a cost estimate completed, and we were about 9.8 million, which is, if you add in design and permitting and potential construction services costs, well, we would have easily exceeded the $10 million limit. So we decided to take a step back and understand, what can we do that wouldn't, what can we take out of the design that wouldn't drastically change the intent while still saving money. And this was one of the items that came up. But I think the decision, we need the decision now because we have to give some feedback to Nelsonburg Wolf on which path to pursue. I mean, we're getting to the point where we're looking at getting 90% documents completed in the next 2 months. So, at that point.
So what are the numbers? I mean, you said it's 9.8 plus how much for design, and what's the total number right now?
So,
Mr. Chairman, maybe I can help out because that was a part of my presentation at the last committee meeting. The total estimate, all-in number is, I don't have it in front of me either, but I believe it's $11.9 million. So with these items that we're discussing right now, the bridge, the reconfiguration of the dock for the boat rental, and a few other items, we can drop that 11.9 and change by $440,000 or thereabouts. I think we reported that out as $500,000 at the last meeting. So that's where we are from a big picture standpoint. We're talking about $440,000 reduction from the 11.9, 11.95 as I recall today. So we can get that number down to somewhere around 11.5, but we're talking about adding back $85,000 right now. So I believe that captures it. What we're trying to convey is that we've identified several reductions in scope here, all adding up to around $440,000 that we don't think will change the park materially. But we've also identified other major reductions in scope that may allow us to get the total all-in cost down to close to $10 million. But those include major changes in scope like eliminating the maintenance building, eliminating one of the large pavilions, eliminating one of the crew docks, and a couple of other items that we all agree, and Nova Parks does not want this to happen, as I understand it. Paul's on the line. But I think these materially change the park, and it's something we recommend we don't do, recognizing that we're not going to be able to get down to the $10 million all-in number. So what we need from the committee and perhaps the board is an understanding that moving forward, it's going to be very difficult to reach the $10 million target without changing the scope again. Where we are in this project is trying to conclude design development. And with design development concluded, hopefully today, we can move forward with production of construction documents in an efficient manner to include some of the bid alternates so that the project can move forward in an effective way.
So I think what you're hearing now, this is Jim, you're hearing now is that at least 3 of the committee members want to see the bridge left in.
Mr. Bonfils, we have a couple more questions, and then
Yep.
I think we
can
open it up. But I do want to say, staff is committed to continuing to look for cost savings. I think, the elephant in the room is acknowledging that it is highly unlikely that the park, as envisioned, will hit that 10 million. But we have Mr. Kelly first.
Okay.
Sean, are you on?
Thanks, Carla.
Uh-huh.
Thanks, Carla. I joined the committee on the walkabout last week, and I think the bridge is a very nice amenity. But 2 things. Back to Mark's comment, echoing that. First of all, I'm glad to see that Mark is acting like a finance guy, so that warms my heart. But I don't want to take away. We want to get the park built, the pavilions, the welcome center, all the costs that go with parking and so forth, and getting people down to the water. I think that has to be the first priority. This is a nice amenity. It's nice to have. I'd love to see it built and be included in the first phase of the park. But if it's going to take away, as Carla was just mentioning, from the main part of the park, I'd be concerned about that. And second, when I was out there and looking what it crosses over to, it looks like there's going to have to be some work done on the other side to allow people to continue to travel on. So I'd be curious to know, maybe not today, but if that has been looked into and what the cost would be to kind of open that up so people, if they do want to cross to the other side, have something to cross over to. And I'm just concerned that there might be additional costs associated with having the bridge. But I'm supportive of the bridge as long as it doesn't take away from the initial costs of the initial part of the park. I think that should be our focus. Thank you.
Thank you. Elton, did you have some information to share?
Yes, Carla. To Mr. Kelly's statements there, I wanted to add one of the stakeholder groups that we've worked with over the years, and that is part of the Beaver Dam community, so to speak. I believe was more of a trail keepers type of group that helps maintain the more natural trails through the park, including some of those further to the west and on the other side there of where the potential bridge would be. So I just wanted to point that out as one of the supporting groups to perhaps Mr. Kelly's concern.
Thank you, Elton. Mr. Sultan also had a question.
I'd like to add my voice to the other members. I'm in favor of the bridge. The only question I have is we looked into alternate construction features of the bridge, that maybe the 85,000 could be less by altering the construction of the bridge. But I do want to say that I am in favor of the bridge.
Thank you, Mr. Sultan. I think, again, staff is committed to looking for those cost savings. I knew your hand was up, Paul. I was getting to you next. So again, it's an estimate. It's the $85,000 estimate for the bridge, and certainly we would be looking for cost savings as we would move forward if that's the direction the board wants to go. With that, Paul?
Great. I just thought I'd maybe give a little context for the board members wanting to see an accessible path to the west side. And that is the under ADA, you don't need every single thing to be accessible, and there's room for primitive trails. The entire Potomac Heritage National Scenic Trail is a rustic trail. So in our planning and discussions of this park, we have the core park that we're developing is 100% accessible. And then our thought was the next step would be to focus on the core to Mount Hope, because those are the two destinations that you're likely to get the most people traveling. The entire west side of the reservoir is going to be a rustic primitive trail. So as nice as the bridge would be, it would be taking people over to a side which is undeveloped currently, other than a blazed trail. I think the vision has been that this project will evolve. So we're building the core park, and then over the years to come, we're going to be developing the trails further. But not that all the trails would be fully accessible when it opens.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
So again, I think, before we turn it back over to Stefan to continue the discussion, this is sort of the fork in the road. And again, our staff's understanding, correct, from the last meeting was that we felt like the majority of the committee, at least, felt like staff get this moving, move forward, look for those savings, bring us back those critical elements. However, based on the numbers, we know that we may need to ask for more money, or we may need to make some very difficult decisions. And so that's why we're bringing forward these critical path items as well, with our recommendation that we go the most cost-effective route. But the board holds the purse strings. You hold the budget, and so the budget, the target, the estimate, whatever we want to call it. And so staff just is really looking for clarification, and I think we're getting that, and I appreciate that. Mr. Sultan, did you have a question?
Have we ever identified what the cost would be in engineering to produce alternate bids for the bridge?
No, I think, and Stefan, you're the you're the engineer here, not me for sure. But no, I think again, when we get to that that phase, we'll be working with the design team and the architect to put those kind of things into the bid documents. Stefan, did you have anything to add to that?
If I could just, I guess, ask a question. Mr. Sullivan, are you talking about, have we asked Nelsonburg Wolf to provide costs on what it would be designed, two separate options, bridge versus pier?
Yeah, we seem to be dismissing the alternate bids, but I haven't seen what it would take to produce the alternate bids.
So as far as other items, items that are simple, like pavilions and stuff, that's more on Loud and Water side, just about how we draw up the contract documents. That won't really take anything from Nelsonburg Wolf's side. If it does, it'd be very minimal. We have not asked them to provide additional design cost for designing both the bridge and the pier moving forward. We're on a very tight budget, and that would require additional, money for the design budget. I guess if that's the route we want to take in designing two separate alternatives, we can instruct Nelsonburg Wolf to do that, but we would need more money for that.
I don't know what the other committee members think about that.
Let's move on with the presentation.
Can I get one more question in, Mr. Chairman?
Okay, and so does Marty. But but that's there are a number of other items that we need to talk about. Let's list them, and then we can circle back after we go through the presentation.
So I'm out of luck.
No, please go ahead. Ask your question.
Okay, so it's $85,000 for the bridge. If we just build a pier, how much is that?
I mean, I don't have those costs in front of me. I'm not sure if Evan, you can pull that out right now, but I
I'm
think
trying to get the delta between, let's say the pier costs 30 and the bridge costs 85. The delta is really only
That
50,
was the
correct?
delta.
the delta
That is
is
the delta.
Okay, that is the delta 85,000. So I took 85,000, divided it by 11,500,000, which is the total cost of the park. So the bridge is 7 basis points of the cost. So what I'm getting at is it's probably one of the smallest things in the park, and I think the impact that getting people completely on the water looking down the lake is huge for that small incremental cost. So I still support the bridge. I'm done. I won't say anything else. Promise.
Thank you. Marty?
Oh, I meant to have my hand down, but I do support the bridge.
Thank you.
Good. I think that clears all the questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Marty lowered his hand. All right. So let's continue the presentation.
okay. If I can get the slides to go. So moving on, another item that we need feedback on is relating to the building structure. We have some rough images to show, but we're mainly looking at the supports of the butterfly roofs. And today I'll be presenting 3 options for that. We'll have a steel column, a wood clad column, and a heavy timber structure, and I'll go into the specifics for each of those. And then once one of those options is selected, we also have some options for the structure base. So I think the best thing, I'll just move forward through these, and we can discuss when I go through some of the options.
Please stay on, Mr. Allen.
Oh, yes.
You guys are gonna hate me, but in the renderings you sent A, B, and C. I have a much more lengthy list of options, which includes D, E, and then at the end of E, there's 1 through 7. Is there any reason why those other options were not included other than just A, B, and C? Because personally, I like all the other options that weren't included better. And I know it's a subjective thing, but I'm just wondering why the whole list wasn't sent out.
Is just to clarify, were those the renderings from when we were talking about the traditional elements? Are those the other renderings, Mr. Allen?
No, D, E, and then there's a subsequent group after those are all butterfly roof renderings, but they were just different variations of what we were talking about along the way. In other words, the E versions have the lolly columns wrapped in stone veneer, and then the 1 through 7 versions have the columns wrapped in wood, so that you can't. And then some of them go all the way up to the bottom of the butterfly roof, so you can't see any metal at all. They're all wood clad. I was just wondering why those options weren't sent out, as opposed to just the A, B, and C options.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
I mean, I'm sure it's just an oversight, but
Carla, this is Evan. Could I jump in real quick?
Sure. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Evan from Nelson Bird Waltz. Terry, one of the reasons that we've kind of backed off of all of those options are still in play. The focus of this decision is purely the columns, is just the structure. And so we didn't want to muddle the kind of messaging with scrims and different siding types and colors and all of that, which are still decisions that will be brought before you all. But the purpose of today's presentation is just about the structure in order to to free up the architect and the structural engineer to start developing those. And then everything that's more cladding and aesthetic will still be brought to you, but those decisions don't hold up, don't impede the structural engineer's design process and documentation.
Excellent. That's a great explanation. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry for that. Should have clarified that from before going into this. So yeah, today we'll just be looking at essentially the items that affect the structural and the architect, and then yes, the goal is at the next meeting to bring sort of the more exterior finishes type decisions to the board. Things like deciding color, possible colors, some other materials. So today we'll just be looking at the columns and the bases. So we have the three options, as I mentioned. Option A is the steel column. This is sort of the original column when we were thinking of the design. The goal is to have almost like a floating canopy type. For those who were on the visit last week, you could see how it was quite open and you could see quite a ways. And from the welcome center, you'd be able to see the water. So the goal was to impede that view site as little as possible with this option. So we're going to have skinny steel columns and it's supporting the butterfly roof. This is also probably the cheapest of the three options. The second option is a wood-clad column. It's a little more hefty. Again, it's still not impeding the view lines much, but it does give maybe a little more traditional feel to the structure. And then this is also the middle of the middle cost of the three options. And then lastly, we have a more heavy timber structure. I guess it's the most uncontemporary of the three. As you can see, we have the heavy X bracing supporting the roofs. Probably impedes the view the most of all three options, and this is the most expensive of the three options. So I guess step one is to sort of get some feedback, and if you guys have any questions, I can answer those on the three options before we go into some of the footings and bases of these three options.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
If we choose something like A, which is the metal poles, and then you put stone, veneer, or wood around them, does that make it more expensive than B?
I think that will depend. I mean, I might be able to turn it over to Evan to discuss a little more, but that essentially is option B. It's basically kind of a hybrid between the steel. It's basically timber-clad steel. So we're using the structural strength of the steel, but softening it by applying wood as basically a veneer. Versus C, which is the timber is actually the structure.
What's the dimension of the upright timbers? Are they 8x8s, 12x12s?
I believe here where they're 8x8s.
Okay.
So when I look at B, Evan, is there steel underneath those vertical support columns?
That's correct.
Okay.
And you don't have the cross members. Correct, because we have the steel, and there'd be flitch plates and all kinds of steel connections that allow us to avoid the cross bracing. But when we're in all timber, that requires the cross bracing.
And what would the dimension of that be? That'd be 6x6 with those?
I think for the cross bracing are probably 6x6 or 8x8.
Sorry, not the cross bracing, but the one we're looking at here in B. The uprights will be 8x8.
I think the outside dimension of the timber would still be 8x8s because you've got a steel core still that you're cladding.
And then the cladding. Okay, got it.
So if you chose option B, could you still then put stone around those if you wanted to, or are we already past that point? If we choose
Nope, absolutely, and that'll be, I think, in the next part of the presentation is once we have a kind of structural approach to the column, then we can do various things with stone on any of these options.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, at this point, it'd be helpful to have I guess, a direction or some feedback on, which option we think is
All right.
the best course and how we can.
I'm not shy, so I'll just kick it off. I'm not a fan. I know this is subjective, so I don't want to put too much into it. I'm not a fan of the steel columns. They look like the ones I have in my basement. They just seem undersized. So I just don't like that look. And I don't like the crisscross pattern. It looks too busy to me, so I vote for B as a straw poll.
B. I think Marty had his hand up also.
If we're looking for votes, I'd have to agree with Terry. I would vote for B for similar reasons.
Brent?
Jim, I don't have a strong preference, so I'm happy with B. But if you have other comments, I'd be happy to hear them.
Yeah, well, I'm happy with B also.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess it sounds like we can, unless someone else has any comments, we can go ahead and move forward under the assumption that we're moving with the wood-clad columns.
Yep.
And with that, the next decision is to understand the footing for the base for these wood-clad columns. And essentially, once again, we have three options. No base, a base with stone veneer infill panels, and then more of a stone water table base. And again, this decision is purely for the bases. We'll have some other decisions we can move forward with in a couple weeks for the committee. But it might be a little tough to see here, but the three options are shown on the right. Again, if you have questions on them, we have Evans here to answer, and we also have Studio 27 on the call, who is the architect. They have to answer any questions as well.
Okay, so you're looking for input from us on that. So I can go ahead and start. I prefer the stone base, and was wondering if we could collect stones on the property and use, but that's just me. Okay. Anyone else?
This is Marty. I would agree with you. I like the stone base as shown.
I agree. I'm sure we're picking the more expensive options each time, but I like the base too, the A3.
Yeah, and so I was going to ask you guys, Jim and Marty and Terry, are you guys more inclined towards the stone veneer, which is B2, or the stone water table, which presumably is actual stone?
B3.
This is Marty, B3.
And just to clarify, this is Evan again. Both would be stone. It's just whether one is proud of the face of the facade, or infilled in between the structural base.
Obviously, the B3 is more expensive than so the 2 is just veneer, right?
Correct. They would both be essentially veneer. It's just one is thicker than the other. One sticks out more proud. So B3 is proud of the face, and B2 is flush with it.
So it sticks out more, where the B2 would be a little more flush.
That's correct.
So B3, you could put your foot on it and tie your shoe, right? B2, yep. You could. Excuse me.
That's correct.
So, what do you think, guys?
Do we have a sense for the impact, the cost impact between any of these choices as that continues to be a discussion item in the background? What's the cost difference between B2 and B3, for instance?
Evan, would you like me to take a swing? So the big difference is between B1 and B2, and that's the no stone versus stone is a $40,000 to $50,000 difference. The difference between B2 and B3 is minimal.
Okay, and you have a sense, just a ballpark of what it would be if we went away from the veneers of various thicknesses here, and went with Jim's idea of doing like an actual field stone water table?
Yeah, what we're proposing would actually be a full bed depth, 4 to 5 inch veneer. If we went with something that was, like an actual dry laid stone, there would be additional labor costs in the range of, 10 to 15%, something like that.
Okay.
So it's the stone type isn't very different. Like for example, B2 is not in air quotes like the sticky stone you see in some residential construction. Both would be full bed depth field stone, and we would certainly try to match as much as we can the tones of the stone that are on site.
Okay, is it cut stone or is it actual field stone?
Right now, that's to be determined. I think a more rustic approach would be field stone with a raked back joint, tightly laid. Another approach would be to use larger pieces of cut stone, which is our goal with this decision is stone there or not, and then we can figure out what type it is, because if it's there, it has a different structural implication than if it's not.
So B2 or B3, stone or no stone, really is the question here.
Correct.
So let's go with stone. And we can decide the material later, or do we need to decide whether it's the prow or no prow?
It would be helpful from a structural standpoint to know what the preference is between B2 and B3.
I like B3 better.
Okay. I think that's Marty. You had your hand up for a little bit there. Did you have something?
I know if this might be a useless question, but I'm just curious. What is the cost difference? I know we're going away from item A, the steel columns, but what is the cost that we're adding by going to B3 from the steel columns? Just approximately.
To all the way to B3 with stone, so it's about to clad the steel columns, we're adding 40 or 50,000, and then we're probably at 40 or 50,000 for the stone. So at rough order of magnitude, is to get all the way to the end, it's $100,000 difference.
Okay.
And then just to complicate things, when we look at the number Dale was talking about, 11,000 or 11,500,000, was that number contemplating more of an A design where it's kind of minimalistic, or was it somewhere in the middle? Trying to get a figure of when we start adding these features in, are we using money that's already been allocated in the entire budget, or are we going above that now?
So I believe the estimate was done off using the skinny steel columns. We didn't have these built into the last estimate, so it'll be sort of an added cost.
Yeah, yes, Gary, I believe that's correct. I'm trying to keep track of the pluses and minuses on this cost estimate as you go through. But my understanding is that the numbers that we talked about earlier were for the steel columns. So we're adding cost back to the project. We talked stone.
Okay.
And not to throw a wrench in anything or complicate things further, but it'd be helpful to remind the group that what we're looking at now is just the Welcome Center. We also have small and large pavilions and a boat rental structure.
Understood. All right, so
Okay.
I think we've agreed on B3.
Yeah, one quick question. So are you all looking for additional input as well on the other structures, or is whatever decisions made here, is that going to carry over into the other structures?
We would suggest that this carries throughout and the reason is that what we're trying to do with this design is simplify it so that it's a kind of modular structural bay, so that when there's construction happening on site, a contractor's not trying to build 5 different structures that are unique to each other,
Mm-hmm.
but that they're replicating the same thing to various scales across the site.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. And I see Koblis has his hand up too. But so $100,000 decision here on this structure, does that then have a cascading effect on these other structures? So adding another 50, 100, 200, this kind of thing?
Correct.
Do we have a ballpark for what the total impact would be if we stick with a similar theme across all the structures?
I think the rough order of magnitude, if we went through all of them, is about 500,000. I think you could make the argument, and I think we would, that maybe the stone water table is unique to the Welcome Center and is not replicated at the more pragmatic, functional pavilions, picnic pavilions, and boat rental area. So I think that would be a way to help take a chunk out of that. So, if we take this and say it's $100,000, and then the other ones without a stone water table are an increase of $50,000 each, that's $350,000 as a rough order of magnitude.
Okay, yeah, I think that's important. I think that's helpful. So, Mark, you go ahead.
Wow, a little overwhelmed. I can't believe we're even talking about this. I guess my question is for the architect is that once we go down this path, it's not like we can then put a bid alternate to go back to the other. We're making a decision here that's going to add between $300,000 and $500,000 to a project that's already almost $2 million over budget.
I think that's a fair statement. I would say that with the selection of option B, where we're cladding the steel columns with wood, I think the steel would be the same in either case, and the alternate would be the wood cladding. So if you needed to make a course correction down the road and save some money, it would be to pull the wood from the steel, and then you're back at option A.
Yeah, I think it's important to just confirm that the decisions and feedback we're seeking today are on the critical path. And so they are decisions, the structural type decisions that we need to keep moving forward. So next month, and Stefan, you can correct me, those are probably less critical, just as important, but less critical in the design.
I'll make one final comment from my perspective, and that is, if we get to a point, or if there's some future point down the road where we're having to choose between nicer elevations or a higher caliber of materials on some of these structures, and say like the bridge or additional paths or trails, I would go for additional money going into the trails, paths, bridges, etc. I think that's going to get used far more by the public, and I think that's where the focus is and should be. So if we have to choose, I would gravitate towards that. So I'm just putting that out there for the rest of my colleagues.
Okay.
Roddy?
Hi, that last bit, I just wanted to clarify in my own mind, and maybe it'd be helpful for others, is that it seems that if we go with option B, which are the more or less wrapped steel columns, it does give us the opportunity to have a bid alternate. I mean, for instance, if we had gone with the timbers themselves as an option, then it would be difficult to go back and forth between the steel and the cladding. But by going with option B, it does still allow us to go forward with a bid alternate to remove that essentially and go pure if that. So there is slight difference in terms of what we'd be obligating to from a budget perspective, right?
Right.
If you go with option B without the water table, how much does the eliminating the stone water table save?
About 50,000.
Well, I like B without the, since we're starting to add up, I feel like I'm sitting down with my home builder and adding all these options. I like B with the bid alternate where we could remove the without the stone veneer, that saves us 50. And then we could also remove the wood cladding if we want to.
Mr. Bonfield, I'd like to acknowledge that Paul asked a question in chat. He asks if the flat roofs of the two buildings under the butterfly roof will be fully sealed / roofed. So if the butterfly leaks, the buildings will still be dry.
That's correct.
Good question. All right, so we're talking about going with B with the and treating it as a bid alternate for both the stone and the cladding. Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't think that's what was said.
Okay, well, let's
I
clarify.
think we go what was said was that if we go with B1, there's no stone going to be put on it. It's B1 with the cladding, and then we can take it off and have just straight steel if it becomes too expensive. But if we put the stone in there,
yeah,
then that we can't do a bid alternate.
Okay.
Is that right, Evan?
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
Technically, I think you could do a bid alternate. You just continue the wood veneer down to take the place of the stone. But you would have, if we get to that point, you would have over designed the foundation to handle the stone. So there would be some loss there. But you could still pull back, but the foundation would have already been built for stone.
So then am I hearing, because I'm trying to keep track of this too, along with Dale, that we're talking about doing no stone base, and so that would be B1 with the wood cladding, and alternate being no cladding, steel.
Yeah, that's how I hear it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then let's go ahead and move on then.
Thank you for the feedback. So the last thing I had to talk about today before I hand it over to Steve is just give a quick overview of the trails within Reservoir Park, and then Steve will cover the trails, from a broader aspect from a county perspective. But so the trails in park, they're essentially like 3 levels of trails. I'll go over each of them in the following slides. And the goal of this was to have different trails for different experiences. Allow access to some of the major structures while not impeding on some of the more natural scenery closer to the water. So looking at the 3 levels of trails, we have first off is a primary trail. These are the big main trails of the park. About 10-foot width. They're going to be ADA accessible. Flat paved or concrete asphalt pavers. What depends on where in the park you are. But these include the bike ped trail coming into the park, and especially the main arc. It is the big one. It allows people to go pretty much span north to south throughout the park. So that's the big primary trail. Now, off of that, we also have our secondary trails, which is a little smaller, still accessible for the most part to everyone. They're maybe 4 to 8 foot width in general. These are again going to include materials like boardwalk, pavers, asphalt. There are some mulch, but they're overall pretty accessible, and these will be a lot of paths to structures, shelters, things of that nature. They include like the main path of boat rental, trails, mill shelters, etc. And then lastly, we have, I guess, tertiary trails, and these are your natural trails. The goal is to get people, I guess, away from the hustle and bustle and give them that experience a lot of people are looking for, I think, with this park, is just being away from everything. And, they're going to be 3-4 foot wide. And, if they're new, we're going to look to mulch them. If they're existing, leave as natural surface. And I think the goal is, if we need to do some improvements, we can work with Nova Parks to do that, following. But as of now, the plan was for existing trails to pretty much leave as is, and then new trails will get, about a 4 foot width mulch bed. And just to give an overview of the trails in the park and sort of how they lay out, I tried highlighting each of the trails. As you can see, the red are the primary, which the main feature is that overarching main arc. And we also have green, which are secondary, and then the large majority of the trails are going to be those natural surface or mulch trails sort of weaving throughout the park. I guess, were there any questions or discussions on trails and what we were intending for each?
I'll just make a comment here. I'm turning on my video. And that is, I think it's important, and I like what you've done here, Stefan, where we've identified and we're designing, developing different trails, different paths, different materials. I think that's important, and I like that feature. Sometimes these discussions can be picking between the merits of a natural surface trail and a hard surface trail, or different widths. And from my perspective, there's value in all of it. And depending on who the user is and what kind of experience they're looking to get out at the park, all of these types have value. And I think it's good that we have a variety of different types of paths and trails there. So kudos on that, and kudos to our design team for doing that. I'd still like to see more, but we can discuss that later on. But I do like the fact that we have sort of these varying degrees of paths and trails. So thank you.
So this is Jim. The trails that go on this map off to the left and off to the right go around the lake, and it's approximately 8 miles. Right now, many of those are in okay shape. We've had some volunteers that have done some maintenance on them, but they're much like the Heritage Trail, National Heritage Trail, often very narrow. As we get more use, and I've been down there on weekends, and as Paul knows, it's been pretty busy. Trails attract a lot of people. There are a number of websites out there, private websites that tell people how to get there and where the trails are. So as we build this and get more people there, we'll need to consider the actual use of these trails. So some of the tertiary ones will get a lot of heavy use, even though they're natural surface. So there'll be some maintenance costs in there. Just wanted to point that out.
Hey, and one more question on the mulch. Are we going to be putting what are we putting on the sides of the trails to keep the mulch contained? Are we doing that, or are we just putting the mulch down and just letting it stay in place for as long as it does?
This is Evan again. In our experience, if we edge the trails, there's two negative effects. One is the added cost, but the second, more importantly, is that that edging actually channels water.
Mm-hmm.
and it will quickly erode and wash the mulch or whatever the trail surface is out. So our recommendation is just to mulch the trail and let the mulch at the edge naturally biodegrade and then refresh it as necessary.
Evan, in your experience, how often does that need to be refreshed? Is that like a 6-month thing or an annual thing?
It's every couple of years, depending on trail use. You know, a year and a half, 2 years, that kind of thing.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Oh, I see a hand just went up, I think.
Yeah, Dale, you have a couple comments?
Mr. Chairman, I know we've made some important, what I believe to be decisions here this morning, and I thought I'd try to capture those and relay costs to them.
Yes, please.
And I could use some help. But I'm referring back to the cost overview that we provided at the last meeting, where we showed the estimated construction cost was $9.8 million, and the total cost, including estimates for contingency and the like, was at $11.978 million. So what I've heard today is we have identified $440,000 that were items like the bridge, reconfiguring the boat rental ramp, and a few other things that taking out a small pavilion and making it a bit alternate. And if we add the bridge back, we're reducing that total 11.978 by $350,000. So with the bridge in, the new cost estimate is going to be on the order of, help me with the math, Carla, you always do, 11.97 minus 350. So I believe that's just north of 11.6.
Yep.
Then we have alternate bids. We have a small pavilion. We have the alternate bids on the cladding for the structures, but we've added back some cost in the structures by moving from the steel pole to increase the foundation for the steel poles so that stone cladding can be laid. And I believe that number I heard was on the order of $50,000 for the main structure. But Evan, maybe you can help us with that. What do we think the delta is right now to bid alternate the stone cladding on the columns for the structures?
For bid alternating, that if we just did the foundation and ended up not doing the stone, you're probably in the $20,000 range.
Okay, thank you. So I think our cost estimate is going to be on the order of 11 million, call it $50,000.
38, yeah.
To do these bid alternates.
Okay. We mentioned the pavilion. I didn't capture the cost of the small pavilion, have it in or have it out as a bid alternate. Well, we won't know until we do the engineering on it. The reason I bring it up is that for our partner Nova Parks, that is a revenue item for use, and it's important to have all the revenue items in place when we open the park. At least that's my opinion.
Mr. Bonfield, I think what would be helpful before we turn it over to Steve to talk about the trails is, as Dale mentioned, the board has have made some decisions, and some, of course, affect cost estimate. I think what would be helpful is if there is actually action out of this committee that would then go to the full board, basically outlining what those actions were, because it wasn't simply feedback, it's actions because they affect cost. And then acknowledging that the board acknowledges that it is unlikely that it is likely that we will exceed the $10 million target. We just need that, staff needs that acknowledgement so that we don't, and again, we will continue to look for cost savings. We'll put in these bid alternates, you know, and we'll work with Nova Parks and Nelsonburg Waltz to be as cost effective as we can. But I think we just sort of need that reassurance from the board that we can keep this moving. So it's just that's the thought that I have.
It's a good thought, and I was going to wait till after Steve's presentation to try and close on that. But this is good timing now. And will it be enough to put this in the report to the board from the committee for our November 12th meeting, or do we need to have a motion and an action out of it?
Well, our chair has his hand up, so we probably could see what he thinks about that.
What do you think, Mark?
Well, you know, as long as we get 50% of the money from Nova Parks, we're fine.
I think Paul just fell off of his chair.
I think Paul just got off, right?
My audio is having some problems here.
I think our agreement precludes that, but yeah.
No, I mean, you know, it's a huge decision, and we have 5 board members here right now that, you know, if we can't get past the 5 board members here of adding an extra $2 million, you know, then I don't know what to say. Then we're just kind of spinning wheels. I think that, you know, this is, especially with all this COVID stuff, you know, parks and recreation become more and more important.
Yeah.
I guess my big question is, Carla, where are you going to get the money?
We'll find the money in the CIP. I mean, I think that we will include this in the capital spending plan as we need to. We'll roll it through the financing plan. I feel confident that we can find that money. I believe you actually have 6 members on this call. Mr. Kelly is on this in this meeting as well. So
I didn't see his name. Sorry, Sean.
I think he is still on. Yep.
Okay.
So with that thought, Mark, you think that my report from the board, I could make it in a form, conclude it with a motion to go ahead and move forward? Do you think that's what we should do at the meeting on the 12th?
I think we should vote on the 12th whether to move forward with a $2 million extra.
Okay. All right.
I mean, we're just kidding ourselves now. You know, I think Dale put it to me. I don't know whether it was a month ago or 2 months ago. Is that there'll be a lot of stakeholders upset if we don't do some of this, and of course, you know, with COVID, it just, you know, I know this is incredible that I'm talking like this, but you know, it just, you know, it just seems like it's a golden opportunity, and you know, as long as Evan doesn't charge us another dime extra than what his contract says, I think we're okay.
Yeah, geez.
All right.
Well, and I think, you know, it's again important to remember that Loudon Water is also receiving a value for their investment in the community and in this park through the easements that we've worked out with Nova Parks. I mean, this is just an ideal partnership, win-win for both. And so I think the board can feel good knowing that their investment is going to be recouped for sure.
Just one added thing. I think we should refrain from any other additional things added outside of this original scope. I know I've heard some banter back and forth about possibly looking at this, possibly looking at that. I think all those things should be off the table right now, and that later, after we've got this open, we can look at those type of things.
Okay.
And we can actually we can include something like that in in the motion to the full board. I'm hearing acceptance of moving forward with a motion to the full board. I'm not sure in my head yet what that motion says, but we could certainly pass it through you, Mr. Bonfils, and of course, our chair,
Yeah.
to make sure it covers what it is that you want the full board to vote on.
That'd be great. I have a short brief of it that I've been working on with the numbers, and I'll review those with Dale, and let's put that together and as part of the report from this meeting, and of course our visit to the park this last week. So I think that's pretty good. I think that's a good plan.
Thank you.
Hey, Jim, can I ask a question or make a statement here real quick?
Sure.
I've got the cost estimates here, and as I've been looking at it, the vast majority of cost associated with this is attributable to the structures. And just to put that in context, the natural surface trail that we discussed earlier, 3 inches of mulch on existing grade, that's $12,000 some there. And so from my perspective, the trails and the pads and all of those sort of biking and pedestrian facilities, in my mind, I think that's priority. From my perspective, I think that's what the public is most interested in when they come to this park. But so from a cost standpoint, I'm not willing to cut on that side. Just speaking for myself, I'm not willing to cut out of paths and trails and bridges and things of that nature. I'd like to, if anything, expand that. And if we're pushed to save money, I'd rather look towards the structures. But I also recognize that the rest of the board might not feel that way, and that's okay. And so, speaking for myself, if we are pushed to the question of the structures plus more money for various treatments of those structures, and then the paths and trails and all that, I'd rather have both than to cut on the trails. I'm not willing to cut on the trails, but if the board wants to look at cutting from the structures, I'm okay with that. And the only other caveat I'd add, and I don't know if Paul's on here or not, looks like it, I guess, but I also recognize that Nova Parks may, or I don't really understand it, so Paul, maybe you can speak to it, but the impact that the structures have on Nova Parks' ability to charge fees and to bring in revenue from this, maybe you could touch on that, Paul, because I understand that might be a different aspect of this.
Thank you. I think Jim has already alluded to it that there aren't a lot of money-making opportunities here to recover the operating costs. Some of the few ones are the shelters, the boathouse will be something, and the boat rentals. There's a extraordinarily high likelihood that the operations will be a net loss, but you're trying to keep that net loss to a manageable level. I don't know that we've put a fine, sharp pencil to exactly what it will be, just because we're kind of waiting for these decisions about the structures to happen. The maintenance building is also important. We want this park to be maintained well, and we need, kind of a back area to work on things. I don't know if that answers your question, but all these buildings do impact the finances of it. There might be ways to cut down the cost of the buildings, but their function is important.
No, thank you. That's helpful. And I'm looking at this crew facility. I mean, we've got $1,084,000, $85,000 just for the structure itself. That doesn't include water and sewer and any other costs associated with that. But I mean, how is it worth the $1 million of expense or $1.5 million of expense for a crew building? Little in comparison with the rest of the park by the general public.
The way I look at the crew building is the way we have it designed right now. It'll accommodate 5, maybe a little more, maybe 6 teams. There are already 5 teams ready to move into it, and other schools are starting teams. So it's not going to accommodate all the rowing needs in the county forever. It kind of will accommodate the need right now. If you look at it politically, the crew teams are the organized entity with a lot of political weight in the community. If we cut anything else, the reaction would be muted. If we cut anything related to crew, the reaction would be strong. I think the Board of Supervisors would be particularly pushing us to have it if we didn't have it. So I think it's a vital piece of it. And the reservoir is perfect for crew. It is a good thing. And as we build out more resources, more high schools will have teams, and it'll be good for the students, good for the community. So I do think it's worth it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful commentary. Yeah, so that's all I've got at the moment.
Stefan, are you ready to turn it over to Steve?
Yeah, if there's no more discussion, yeah, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Steve. He's the director of Parks and Rec out at Community Service at Loudoun County, and he'll give an overview on the linear parks and trail system. So Steve, just let me know when you want me to switch slides, and I'll be happy to oblige.
Great. I'd like to welcome Steve. I've had the opportunity to work with Steve for almost 20 years. We won't mention that, but the whole trails initiative, and we've been working all the time on it, and really looking forward to your presentation. So please go ahead. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Jim, and thank you everybody for inviting me to come out this morning and join with you. I appreciate being able to listen in on some of the outstanding work that's going on out at the Reservoir Park and the reservoir itself. I know it's one of the greatest resources that we have in the county. I know as a water resource, but also as a recreational amenity. And so we're excited as a department to have a little bit of partnership with you all as well. Linear Parks and Trails System is a project that came forward recently, but the history really goes back well over almost 25, 26 years when the county started with a trails and greenways plan. There was a plan that was adopted back in '94. The difference back then is that there really was not a whole lot of community groundswell that got behind that project, and from that there really was no political will to fund or put resources towards that. And although our department has worked on various projects through the years, updating the board and getting certain direction, there never was a revisiting of a countywide system until about 2 years ago. Next slide, please. And what happened was there was some discussion with some stakeholder groups as well as some board members. And right at the end of the previous board, there was, at the previous board's term, there was direction that came from the Board of Supervisors to create this countywide linear parks and trail system. And I think it's important that we talk about, a lot of the focus gets sent over on the trail side, but the initiative really is linear parks and trails. I think that's important because, as you all were talking earlier today, one of the things that is very important in the community, and especially we're seeing this, and I know Paul is seeing this in his facilities as well. During the COVID situation, it has highlighted the need for just a space to get out, whether you're hiking or participating in active recreation. That ability to go out and get refreshed in the great outdoors, or just be alone for a little bit, is so crucial. And so with the linear parks portion of that, we see that as just as important as the trails, as a way of connecting the communities and providing that recreational opportunity. So the way that we went about this is about 2 years ago, the PROS board, after getting direction from the Board of Supervisors, the PROS board is Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Board, one of the advisory boards for my department. And we held a kickoff meeting where we were brainstorming and going through how we were going to go about this. And a part of that meeting, we identified all of the potential types of users of a linear parks and trails system. And then we invited representatives of those types of groups that we knew to a meeting back in February of 2009. And what we did was ask them to come back to us with their own presentations of what they felt a linear parks and trails system should look like, what was important to them, and how they felt we should go about this whole process. And as you can see down in the bottom, there was quite a few people that were identified, quite a few groups, including Loud and Water, which is a very key partner in this process. And then after the stakeholder presentations, we did not want this to be simply geared around specific organized user groups. We wanted the general public to have an opportunity as well. So we held the public input session to get that, and then took all of that information and kind of put it into a presentation to go back to the board. Next slide, please. So what we had come out of all of that information gathering of the various groups, obviously, was there was a desire for more trails. But really, one of the things that came out, and I know Nova Parks, Paul and I have talked about this as well, is that we do have a lot of trails and we do have a lot of parks, but access is a major problem across the county. Access to water, access to the existing trails. And so that was something that really was brought up, and parking at those access points also was something that was a consistent message coming back across the various user groups. There was a desire for that sense of a contiguous park system that goes throughout the entire county. A lot of times what happens in a fast-growing community such as Loudoun County is the land that we get for parks is through the development process, through proffers and things along those lines. And so there are areas of the counties that are void of parkland, because typically that has to be, or in the past had to be given as a part of that development, which is more in the eastern part. So trying to figure out how we can have a countywide park system was another topic that consistently was coming up. The overall connectiveness of the system. One of the things that we see and you hear about all the time at the board level right now is what happens with our sidewalk system, where you have sidewalks that go and just stop, and that's a very common problem that we have with our trail system. Also, it's very segmented, and although certain areas of the trail system we have done gap analysis, there was a desire to have a countywide analysis of where those gaps are and where are some of those places where with a minimal amount of money we can have a maximum impact for access to trail system. Obviously, the protection of the tremendous environmental and historic resources that we have within the county was a concern and a focus that was brought up. But on the flip side of that, we do have such great environmental and historic resources here in the county. We also wanted to make sure that we could properly highlight some of those very unique things that is found here in Loudoun County through the implementation of this trail system. So ultimately, after all of those discussions, the park board, who actually was charged to work with staff to help with the implementation of this, what the park board came back, or PROS board came back with a recommendation, was we knew that we could not do this without bringing a consultant online, and that although there was a trails and greenways plan from 25 years ago, we felt that it needed to be redone. So we did create a linear parks and trails subcommittee of the PROS board, and that includes stakeholders from the various user groups for such a type of initiative or type of project. We also wanted to not have happen what happened 25 years ago and just have a lot of talk about a linear parks and trails, but we wanted to show progress, essentially get some new things on the ground. So we identified what we're calling near-term projects, and you'll see what some of those are in just a minute, so that as we're going through this development of the county-wide plan, we also can be doing trail projects and be doing ribbon cuttings and opening sections of trails so that we are showing progress and keeping that excitement up in the community for this county-wide project or initiative. And then it also was very, excuse me, it was also very good and very lengthy discussions surrounding the fact that not every trail is going to be appropriate for every type of user. We have the equestrians, we have the biking community, both road biking and mountain biking. We have trail runners, we have trail hikers, we have just walkers. We have folks who have mobility issues, but not every trail is going to be appropriate for every type of user. And the other thing that came up is that not every linear park would be appropriate for a trail to be in it, depending upon the sensitivity of what may be there environmentally or other types of resources. So there was a good discussion about that. Now, I will say that we are approaching it from the standpoint of out of the gate, let's see what type of use could happen on this trail. And then we back off from there and finally settle on what is appropriate. But I don't want everybody to realize that or think that what we are doing is putting this massive trail system that every type of user is going to be able to go to every single trail. That's not the intent here. However, we do know that we have a significant gap in service delivery to certain types of users, such as equestrians, such as mountain bikers. And so that is something that is at the forefront of our thought when we are looking at the implementation of this overall plan. Next slide, please. So some of the ones that we identified with short-term projects, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see that they are pretty much all over the county. But the other thing that I will highlight, and this is one of the issues that we recognize, is if you look in the northern part of the county and the southwest part of the county, there's not a lot of short-term projects there. And a big reason behind that is that there's not a lot of public land currently. Now, we do have the state park that's coming, and I know Nova Parks has some additional land that is not where some of these short-term projects are located. But it just gives you an idea of some of the challenges that we're trying to overcome when it comes to connecting those types of, or those areas of the county. One of the things that you'll see on the second bullet, the Broad Run Stream Valley Park, that is a part of a much larger initiative that has been going on for quite some time. Back in 2006, the Board of Supervisors directed us to do a gap analysis of the Stream Valley, the Broad Run Stream Valley park system, essentially going from the Potomac River all the way down to right adjacent to where Hanson Park is being built in the Dulles District now. And then the other one was the Goose Creek, also starting from the Potomac River and going all the way down to Route 15. And so those gap analyses were done and have been used over the past 15 years when we have referrals come in and projects that are happening to acquire hopefully parkland, but at a minimum easements, so that when we implement these trail systems, we have that continuous trail that goes on hopefully both sides of both of those major stream valley corridors. And so some of these ones that you see as far as the short-term action projects are ones that we have the ability now to put additional trail systems on the ground. And so you'll see some of these that will be coming with volunteer projects through the LPAT. And just for example, the one at Bless Park, what we're talking about that is connecting Bless Park to the toll house, which is right at Route 7. And essentially, we have worked with the Northern Virginia Criminal Justice Academy and secured a formal easement along the Broad Run so that we extend that trail system out of Bless Park through the Criminal Justice Academy and on under Route 7 to the toll house, which is in the CIP currently to be turned into a trailhead. And then that also, the plan directly links us to the Kincora property that's coming to us, about 150 acres, and the Commonwealth Center, which you see on the fourth bullet there, which provides another large piece of property right there in the heart of Ashburn, which will all be used as passive recreation and trails. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the Broad Run Stream Valley Linear Park and there you go. Goose Creek Stream Valley Linear Park, the Washington, the WNOD Trail essentially, and the Potomac Heritage. You'll see those on the map in front of you. One of the things that is a part of the Linear Parks and Trails initiative that the consultant is working on is the implementation of what we are calling the Signature Project. And essentially the Signature Project, if you were to start at the confluence of the Broad Run and the Potomac River, which is essentially there at Bless Park, come all the way down, go south along the Broad Run, hit the WNOD Trail, which I can tell you we are so fortunate in this county to have the WNOD Trail as a part of our trail system here that's provided for everybody. Because it's just unlike anything else and really helps with the connectivity of these communities. But this Signature Project that we're going to be working on right out of the gate is making that loop available that goes down the Broad Run, back west on the WNOD, north along the Goose Creek, and then you tie into the Potomac Heritage National Scenic Trail. So you have that kind of rectangle right in the heart of the county, very close to the population base, and getting that open as another one of those projects that will be able to show movement with this overall initiative. Now, we can go ahead. The initiative really is trying to connect the community. We're talking about this from an economic standpoint, connecting the towns, but really being able to provide an opportunity for folks to get around the county in multiple ways of, whether it be biking, whether it be equestrian, whether it be hiking, but really having that connection. It's something that is going to take an enormous amount of partnerships. We have been talking with the various folks in the towns. Obviously, Nova Parks is a great partner and has been at the table with some of these discussions with us. The other thing that is a major player, or the other group that's a major player, is the Homeowners Association, because in Loudoun County, the homeowners have control of an enormous amount of their own trail system. And we're not trying to reinvent the wheel in those various communities. But we do want to be able to have that connection with the Homeowners Association. So what's been going on or done to date? Well, obviously, I mentioned earlier, we created that Linear Parks and Trails Subcommittee. They created the scope of work and put that out after going to the Board of Supervisors for an RFP, which we've already gone through that process, and we have hired design workshops out of Raleigh, North Carolina, with a lot of background in developing these overall plans. We continue to work with that stakeholder group. I can tell you we had several of the work days planned, and then we had an issue with a little thing called COVID, and it kind of put us on the back burner for a little bit. But we have our kickoff meeting next week with the design workshop group and the LPAT subcommittee. So we should be off and running, and my light just went out in the office here. We should be off and running here fairly soon. One of the things that we are so excited about with regards to the Beaver Dam Reservoir and Reservoir Park is where that's located. Not only is it, a jewel of the county and located right in the heart of the county, but it also is right adjacent to some of our park sites. It also is right off, obviously, the Goose Creek, which is one of our main trail projects and main corridor projects that we're working on. And we see a lot of synergy for what you all are doing and what this project is all about, and truly see some great opportunities for how this overall trail system fits perfectly with what you are trying to do from a recreational standpoint, but also from an educational standpoint, which is what we do in a lot of our park sites as well, and along these trail corridors. Next slide, please. I think actually that might be it. So in the end, we recognize that this is a very long-term project. This is not something that we anticipate being done, in the next couple of years. This is more of a journey, and but we have taken some very crucial steps, such as the Goose Creek Stream Valley Corridor, or the linear park, as well as the Broad Run linear park. Both have been put into the county's CIP program. Obviously, the consultant is on board for taking the plan to a new level, and that way we have that as we move forward with the implementation of this overall project. And the last thing that I will say is that we are seeing a change in the attitude of the community and the attitude of even developers that are coming in, because we used to have to struggle for getting things, and now we're seeing more and more applications coming through where they automatically are offering up linear parkland and trail corridors, which is a great thing, because they recognize that is a priority for the county. They recognize the benefits to the citizens, which benefits them. And quite frankly, it makes it a little bit easier for us when we are trying to put all of these pieces together for this overall program. We do have a lot of work to do. We are behind on the number of trail miles that we should have by about 100 miles. But a lot of that is not because we don't have the easements or the land. It was, again, that connectivity. And through some of these things that we're working on right now, we anticipate that we're going to be able to make a pretty big dent into that in a very short period of time. So I've talked probably longer than I was supposed to. Just wanted to bring you all up to speed, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have or sign you up for a volunteer trail day.
Thank you, Steve, very much. It was a great presentation. I will definitely sign up for a trail day. I do have one question, and then I know Terry has a question. The question I have is coming down from the confluence of the Broad Run to the down past the plant and the toll house on the Broad Run and the Potomac. What's the status of that and coming through? I know it's going to go across the Loudon Water Broad Run treatment plant, and then trying to connect to the O&D trail and then beyond. Do you have an update on that one?
Sure. So on the run, if you come down from Bless Park, you go through the Criminal Justice Academy, and then we are in conversations with VDOT now about getting under Route 7. They've given us some options of what we can and cannot do under Route 7 so that we can have safe passage underneath that bridge. And then at the toll house, as I mentioned, that's a current project we're working on with the CIP. One of the things that is a part of that project is getting a pedestrian bridge across the Broad Run right there and get you over into Kincora. And then Kincora, you've got about 150 acres, give or take, that takes you all the way down on the east side of the Broad Run, and then even beyond down to the opposite side of Reds Park. On the west side, we have been successful in gaining some easements of the various property owners as you're heading up towards where Top Golf is. But we don't have all of those. So that's why we're looking to get that trail or that bridge across the Broad Run. The thing that we worked on last year and were successful with is the Commonwealth Center, where we were able to acquire a significant chunk of land on the west side of Broad Run that comes down and abuts Loudon Water's facility there along the parkway. There is an easement for a trail along the Broad Run along the Loudon Water property. So when we get that connection over the Broad Run from the toll house, we will be able to have a trail system on both sides that essentially goes down through that entire area. Then we bump back over on the west side of the Broad Run, and we do have some gaps between there and the WNOD trail, which we are looking at as kind of phase one. But there is some active negotiation going on with that. Primarily on the east side of the Broad Run. It's a little bit more challenging on the west side, but we're working that as well. After you get across the WNOD, we have been very successful in some of the various developments that are going on, primarily data centers through that one area. And then you're down into Loudon Valley Estates, where we have a very through school property, as well as the Broad Run Stream Valley Corridor Park, which, Jim, I know you went on a hike with us down there, is a very long stretch of parkland that a lot of people don't recognize is there and open, and takes you all the way down almost to where the backside of Dulles Airport is currently. So there is a lot that's going on with that project.
Well, that's great. That's great. And these projects take on a life of their own. Let me move to Terry next. You were next.
Yes, question. Thank you. And thank you, Steve, for that presentation. That was really helpful. You might have covered my question in your presentation, but is there any way to connect the WOND to Beaver Dam so that obviously people riding their bikes down WND could actually get down to Beaver Dam? Is that in the works? And what do you need us to do to try to help make that happen?
So there's, thanks for the question. There are several different options. I know that when we are looking at the Goose Creek Stream Valley Corridor, some of those trails may be appropriate for mountain bikes, others may not. The other thing that we are looking at, and the consultant is aware of, is the county also has the trail for, or the plan for sidewalks and paved trails. And I want to be clear that this whole Linear Parks and Trails initiative is for unpaved natural surface trails. And so that's one of the things that I think we need to do a better job of communicating that out, because I know there's a lot of confusion about that. And that's one of the things the consultant is going to be helping us with, is that marketing and public information plan. But this is for natural surface trails, not paved trails. And so I think whether it is through a combination of this particular trail system or the other paved trail system that you have, I do think you're going to be able to have that connection, because that is one of the things that both of these initiatives, whether it's the paved or this linear parks and trails, the connectivity of the various communities is a very high priority in both of them.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes, thank you. And Steve, thank you for your presentation. It was very helpful. Jewel, if you wouldn't mind pulling up that slide I sent you there.
Thank you.
I can see it.
Sure, Michael just put it up.
Yeah, great. So everybody who's looking at their screen, so this is the pedestrian shed and the bike shed for the Ashburn Metro. This was done as part of the comp plan stuff. Kimberly Horn was involved in this, but you'll notice that the reservoir is within the bike shed for the metro station, and I think that's really important. You can also see the W&OD trail there towards the north falls within the the bike shed of the Ashburn Metro, and that's basically a 3-mile ring around the station. So I think that's something that needs to be in our minds as we're planning this out. When I was looking at the design drawings that we've got 9 bike loops to park your bikes on, and you could try to double those up and get 18. But I've got pictures that I could show you all where it doesn't work well to even double them up. But even if you did double them up, to have 18 spots for bikes, I think is just poor. I think we can do a lot better than that. Again, this is not a big cost, right? So this is not something that should be driven financially. It's really just having good design. And there's substantial improvements that are planned that the county has in the works, bike and ped improvements to Croson Road, which is a direct shot right there to the ball fields, which are behind this park that we're working on. And let me pull some up real quick. So Loudon has a bike and pedestrian mobility master plan. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with it, but a lot of work went into this. It's over 100 pages, and some of the highlights here, just on the summary. For instance, this increased levels of bicycling and walking will help to improve air and water quality in Loudoun County. And I think that dovetails with our mission at Loudoun Water well. It says further that the plan recognizes the intrinsic value of bicycling and walking, and that Loudoun's goal is to advance bicycle and pedestrian mobility as a transportation goal. And this plan, this master plan, was the product, it says, of extensive analysis conducted by the Citizens Advisory Committee, county staff, consultants, blah, blah, blah. This was another years in the making to put this thing together. So I'd like to see us doing a lot more on the bicycle improvements to the property, and also the walking. I think we should be looking at as phase 1, not phase 2 or phase 3. I think Jim commented that it's been 5 years since we had the first sort of public open house on this thing. And I don't want to have another 5 years go by or 10 years before we've got a full trail, both for walking and biking around the reservoir that can connect up to the metro. I think that's really important, and that should be considered now. So those are a couple of my comments.
Thank you, Brent. Was there anybody else with questions? Steve, you had mentioned that this trail study and plan that you're doing is all for natural surface recreational trails. And part of what Brent mentioned is the
Bike
trail
ped.
system. Wait, go ahead.
I was going to say the bike ped.
Yeah, the bike ped and there, and that a lot of that has to do with VDOT and others. I know that that the county has set aside some money to put in some paths and some sidewalks to do some interconnects, and those can also help the recreational trails. Is that study that you're doing also going to help identify many of those missing links?
It won't be focused, Jim, on the missing links associated with anything transportation related with the bike ped plan. This is more recreational and natural surface trails. But what it is going to do is look at how those two work together, because we do recognize that there is a lot of times where you are not going to have necessarily a natural surface trail that can connect one community to the other, but there may be an existing either multi-use trail or sidewalk system in place already. And so you still would have the ability to hike or potentially bike to get from one to the other and then on to another recreational trail. So they are going to be looking at how all of those things fit together, but they won't be making recommendations on bike ped.
All right. Outside of attending the input sessions, what can we do as Loudon Water and Loudon Water's board to help this project?
Well, I think just staying engaged with the process. I mean, we have a lot of very similar goals that you all have from a standpoint of making this community the best community possible for its residents. And although we may have some varying focuses that we have, in the end, you know, we all want clean water. We all want great communities. We all want those park systems and trail systems that we can be proud of and use and safely use and use very easily. One of the things that this project is trying to do is have a trail and park system within a certain amount of distance from every resident in the county when it's all done. And part of that, I think we are going to need help from you all, because you all are landowners, obviously, and have some of the, quite frankly, some of the most incredible resources within the county when we're talking about water access and things along those lines. So those types of partnerships that I know, you know, can't be finalized on a conference call, nor do I believe they should be. But I think having those conversations over the years about how we can continue to work together. I know I've worked with Mark over the past couple of years, and it's been a great working relationship. And so I think continuing that, staying engaged, volunteering where we can, and then also letting us know as the local Parks and Rec department how we can help you all, because again, I think that we share very similar missions.
Thank you very much. Are there any more questions for Steve? All right, thanks again, Steve, and we appreciate it, and we'll have you back soon for an update.
Thank you very much. You all have a great evening, afternoon.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Hey, Jim, Brent Campbell here. Wanted to ask a question here. So it sounds like we're going to be taking a vote at our next board meeting on the additional costs that we've discussed earlier.
Yep.
And then a decision will be made one way or another, and then we can move on, and I'm sure staff will be thankful for that.
I'm sure.
But also as it pertains to some of the stuff that we just talked about with bikes and bike racks, trails around the reservoir, bike paths, all this stuff. I'd be interested in your perspective, Terry's, Marty's, and that's more in an informal sense. But if there's support for that, I think that's another thing that should go on the board's agenda here on the 12th that can be voted on, whether that's something that we should be doing now or if it gets pushed to a future time.
Well, I happen to agree that there's more we can do for trails around the park, and as well as other amenities. I agree with you that having bike racks, but I found it rather interesting when I went to the train station. There's only 14 bike locking loops. And there's some at the Starplex at Brambleton Park. So we'll have to consider how many we have, and we should consider that discussion. And we can have that. We don't have to have that in that kind of a motion. But I do think that there will need to be some sort of phase 2 with the trails around there, and then maybe something to do with the peninsula. But I think we need to get this project done and stay within this scope and move forward. I see Mark has raised his hand. Mark, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with both of you. I just think that to just willy-nilly put it on the board agenda would not serve a purpose right now. I think there should be some kind of study to find. Oh, I moved my computer, so I'm talking out the side of my ear. I think there should be a study made. I think it can be an informal study to find out what's best, but I don't think we should just jump in to adding trails and until we've seen what it is. As far as the bike racks, we can add bike racks as an alternate. That's not a big deal, but I think there should be some kind of study, because I don't want to start going off one path and then it's a better thing to go a different way to get to a different trail, which is more important, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
No, and I appreciate that, and that's why I wanted to hear what everyone had to say here. But I think the connectivity around the reservoir and the fact that we own the entire perimeter, there's a lot of dead end trails and missing segments, and frankly, most of the bike ped stuff in the county is very fragmented, and that's been touched on numerous times. Steve touched on it in his presentation. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the unique things, one of the unique opportunities we have with this particular park is we own the whole perimeter, and putting in trails is cheap. As we look at all the costs, this is not an expensive item. And so I don't understand why we're not going full bore with biking and pedestrian improvements here in phase 1. I don't understand it, particularly on the west side. You already have this massive scar running north-south through those power line easements. It's 90 feet wide, and putting a trail there or a path for bikes and all that is really easy and simple. We don't even have to do clearing there, and that's similar to other parts of the WNOD where they just follow the power line easements. So I'd just be curious what everybody else has to say on that.
Jonathan?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do think, obviously, making provisions for trails and these sorts of connections, providing easements, certainly makes a whole lot of sense and is within Loudon Water's ability. We do have to remember that there are some constraints on the expenditure of the ratepayers' funds for projects that are not directly related to utility purposes. And of course, the park, as Carla pointed out earlier in the meeting, has a huge justification for utility purposes. First, because we're getting all these easements from Nova Parks in exchange. So that was the core utility purpose. But also we have the interpretive elements, which are I think we can make that connection between our utility purposes and educating the public on source protection and those sorts of issues. But there probably is a boundary in terms of additional expenditures for creating recreational facilities that gets beyond that utility purpose. So I'm not sure that there's an absolute bright line here, but I just wanted to make sure that the board keeps attention to those limitations as you begin looking at these additional projects that Mr. Campbell mentioned.
Yeah, and that's very helpful. And to piggyback on that, Jonathan, I guess in a couple months, if I'm remembering correctly, we're going to be asked to relook at that management plan, where the whole park, not just this current 60, 70 acres, but the whole park is being given over to Nova Park for management, the 99 years and all of that. And so as we're talking about improvements within the boundaries of that scope and that geographic area, Jonathan, does that still fit within what you just described, or would you say no?
Well, I think the management plan is really focused on the way that Nova Parks will operate the facilities. That's the specific purpose for it under our agreement with Nova Parks. Certainly, if the board decides that you want to allow Nova Parks improvements within the property at their cost, I don't think there's any constraint on that. But I just wanted to point out, if we're talking about actual Loudon water expenditures for these improvements, we'll just have to make sure that they can be justified as utility purposes that are related to your mission and under the enabling legislation for a water and wastewater authority.
And Jonathan, that management plan does have a geographic area that's tied to it, correct? That's my recollection.
Yes, it includes the water surface, obviously, because Nova Parks is responsible for recreational access there. I believe it includes the perimeter trail that exists now. So it is really intended to be for the entire Beaver Dam holding in terms of Nova Parks recreational management. Yeah, and that's my recollection as well, is that it encompasses the full perimeter of the Beaver Dam Reservoir, with the one exception where we carved out that little area right next to the dam where we didn't want people canoeing too close and all of that. Okay. I see Terry's got his hand up.
Yeah, thanks. No, I wanted to just echo Brett's comments. I think we can, whether it's Stefan or somebody could maybe give us a briefing of how we stand in the park right now as far as bike access is concerned. I don't even know. I mean, are they going to ride down the main road, our main entry road? Or are they going to come down a path from the ballpark? I mean, I would like to see a little bit, not a lot of effort, but a little bit of effort showing me where the egress and ingress will be for bikes, and then where they park, and maybe we can add some more bikes. And as far as paths, I agree with Brent, obviously staying within the scope of what Jonathan recommended, but it seems, I think we just need to look at it more than we have. Maybe we have, and I just don't know about it, but while we're at it, it would be nice to maybe improve connectivity around the park. I know we have a footpath that goes all the way around the reservoir right now, but I'm not opposed to at least researching the subject. I feel like I don't know exactly what we have and where we have it. So I don't mind more clarity on that. We don't need to make a motion about it, and maybe this thing can go on concurrently, as we approve phase one and we're getting through all these designs and the meetings that we're having, maybe concurrently in the background, we could have 5% of the work being done on some of these issues that Brett's raised. That's all I have.
Great. Anyone else? So we have to talk about our next meeting. So I looked at the calendar and wanted to do it before later in November. So I'm thinking 8 a.m. on the 16th, and we'll continue some discussions on the park, and then I think we should also consider add to it to the agenda something on trails. So at least a general discussion among the board members. So that's the next thing on our agenda, and then does anybody have any input on that meeting?
No, but I'll ask one question, maybe to Nelson Bird Waltz. How much effort would be involved for you all to draw up a location for, say, like a bike path and a more robust walking path, like we talked about with the natural service, with the mulch? How much effort would be involved for you to just show us an alignment that would go around the reservoir?
Not a whole lot of effort. The diagram that Stefan shared earlier locates how people on bicycles and on foot would arrive on a dedicated 10-foot wide path that comes from the ball fields and from the road. Around the reservoir, there are existing foot trails. We don't have those located exactly because we haven't surveyed them, but we could certainly put some diagrams together that hint at their location and start to calculate length and access points and things like that. And some of that we may actually have from previous exercises, but I'd have to look back.
Yeah. Well, I think that'd be helpful, because to have a meaningful discussion at our next board meeting, just like we had this morning, it's going to involve two things. One is the design, and then what's the cost implications. And so if we can have a quick sketch that just says, here's what an alignment could look like, and here's what it would cost, rough numbers, ballpark, then I think the board can have a discussion and say, yes, we think that has merit, or no, let's not spend the money now, and that can be moved to some future time.
Okay. Thanks for that, Brent. I think that brings us to the conclusion of our meeting. Looking forward to the next meeting. I really appreciate everybody's participation, all of our guests, all the public that stayed with us. This has been a very long meeting. I generally like to try and keep them to an hour. This was obviously longer than that, like twice as long. So I would be like to
motion to adjourn.
Have a motion to adjourn. Yes.
I'll second it.
We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Voice vote.
Yes, sir. Voice vote. Mr. Allen?
Aye.
Bonfield? Mr. Campbell?
Aye.
Mr. Sultan?
Aye.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned at 11:36.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.